Hello, my name is Wei-Liang. I'm from Tinkerbox. I should have posted a snippet of the Facebook conversation that happened that caused me to be here, but yeah, so I'm a relatively new developer, so just to set expectations, these are not very high-level tips. Just from what I know and what I think. Most of us would use the pipe symbols or the ampersand symbols when we construct Boolean expressions and we want to, evaluate true, false, and or. If you come from, so I came from a Python background back in university, so I'm very used to typing the or because I think it's more readable most of the time. So that was a very early mistake that I made because it doesn't work out as you think it would. Yeah. Yes. So as you can see here, I have a user object and it has a mobile number which returns nil, and then it can be assigned. I use that to assign to a variable telephone number. If I use the pipe, then it assigns the string. But if I use the keyword or, then telephone number, the variable, doesn't actually get assigned the value. So what's happening here is that the pipe symbols and the or symbols don't have the same binding. So what's actually happening is something like this. If you use the pipe symbol, the order of evaluation Ruby takes is it evaluates what's in the brackets first, and then it assigns to the variable telephone number. But if you use or, it will evaluate that assignment first, and then evaluate the next part of the line. So it's like I execute this part, and then I return whatever this expression returns. So this is like I run this, and then I run this. That's why initially you return the string, but the assignment is just for this part. So this was a gotcha if you come from another language.
It's flow control.
Flow control.
Flow control.
Flow control, yes.
If you'd come from Perl rather than Python, it would be much more familiar.
Yes, that's actually the next tip. So so this tip is don't use and or, right? So the next one is use it for control flow, yeah. So, sorry. No worries. Okay, so why did Mats, yeah, I never figured out how to pronounce that. Mats. Why did he put this in there? So, because Ruby has some grounds in Perl. So in Perl, you use this to run statements conditionally in a sense. So if you look at the first statement, users.save or handle validation errors. So because of what we call short circuit evaluation, to evaluate an OR statement, you don't actually need to evaluate both sides of the OR statement. So long as the first side is true, you don't have to evaluate the second side. And the same is true for an AND statement. If one side is false, the first side is false, you don't have to evaluate the second side. So in this way, you can control what gets executed on condition of something else executing successfully. So yeah, so this is when you would use an AND or OR statement. So in some cases, you could see yourself using the ampersand, double ampersand or double pipe symbols in the same situation, so in the first two cases. But sometimes it doesn't work out quite right, especially if you're writing, you're using control, these symbols, these keywords for control flow, like in this case. So in this case, so because we use the keyword AND, it evaluates the left side first and then the right side. But if you use a double AND ampersand, it will evaluate this part first and then put it into the next side. So that causes the error to fail because if your sendCreditAlert function doesn't return something that you can perform the double AND operation with a fixed num, then it returns an error. So yeah, this is when you would use the keywords AND or. Yeah. All right, so the next tip is the save navigation operator. This is in Ruby 2.3. So if you're in Rails and you use active support, you'll be familiar with the try method. And try method basically says, okay, if I have something that returns nil, and I'm not necessarily sure whether it's nil or not. If it's not nil, I want to run a method on it. If it's nil, I want nil. I don't want an exception to be raised. So if you're familiar, then you would know that if my rubies.pizzas returns nil, I can still do a try first, try steal, to try and steal that pizza. And it wouldn't work because it's nil, but you won't raise an exception, right? Because in some cases, you might get some pizzas. So you want to try. In Ruby 2.3.0, you get this for free using the save navigation operator. So this is how it will work, the equivalent statement. So this is really handy because you type less, and typing less is a good thing for all programmers. Also, we like pizzas. So anyway, there is a small gotcha in that it doesn't work exactly the same as your try active support method. And that's why I had that clause there. So the save navigation operator actually checks, okay, if it's a nil, if you're calling, trying to call a method on a nil object, then it doesn't matter what method you are trying to call, it will always return nil. But if you're doing this try thing, the save navigation operator on a not nil object, then it will actually check that that object can respond to that method in the first place. If it does not respond to the method, then it will raise a no method error as you would expect if you normally called the same method. So it doesn't work exactly the same, but I think for most cases, at least in what I've encountered, the save navigation operator is a good thing. So yes, use the save navigation operator. Next tip. Okay, so now we get into a bit more. You normally wouldn't use these methods. So this is a method that I encountered when I was doing some parsing of data. So how many of you guys use grep before on enumerable? Yeah, so not a lot of hands. Basically, so most of us are familiar with grep, the command line tool, which allows us to search through for a particular regular expression. So Ruby provides us a way to do this as well. If we provide a collection, like email addresses that I've done, you provide a regular expression, and then it will check through each element in the enumerable for something that matches the regex expression. And we return all elements that match the regex expression. All right? So what was introduced in Ruby 2.3.0 is the inverse. So you can do grep v, which will return everything that does not match the regex expression. So yeah. So if you're a person who uses grep in Ruby, this is the inverse, which is nicer than what you had to do the other way. Yes, so that is tip 4. Tip number 4, continued, is that you can also use this for type checking. So, yes, is the meaning of life 42? Is it? Yes, I don't know. So, if you define an enumerable and you pass to the grep method something that defines the double equal method or the triple equal method, it would run through all elements in the enum and will return an array of all elements that match that double equal method. So you can use fixed num or nil class because the class object implements this. It also works with grep v. So yes, you can do this if you need to do some kind of type checking. Though in Ruby, hopefully you never have to do this. Okay, tip number 5. So that's chunk. This is another enumerable method. This is the last one. This is another one that you won't encounter very often because hopefully, well, it's a specific type of use case. So let's say you have an array or enumerator of a bunch of stuff, and you want to group them with according to some criteria. So the example I've given is an array of numbers, and I want to group them according to whether they're even or not. Right? So normally you pass it in a block. You can do .chunk, pass in the element as a parameter of the block, and then whatever the block returns becomes the criteria for your grouping. So in this case, I use the toproc, the new syntax, .even. So you call .even on every single element of the enumerator, and it will group the elements according to whether they're even or not. Now you notice that the output is not totally grouped because you get false 1, because 1 is odd. True, you get 2, 2, 2, and then false 3 and 1, and you get the idea. So the thing you need to understand here is that chunk does not do the full grouping. So it runs through all elements in your enumerator once, and that's it. So it forms a new group every time it sees a change in the value that is returned by whatever you pass into the chunk method. So when would you use this? Not very often. One use case I encountered, I didn't have to do it myself, but I saw this online when I was wondering why people would use this method. So the use case was if you had to generate a report of, say, accounts, and you needed to group them by month. So you would pass in the chunk to the chunk method a strf, a string format time, that would just select the month, and it would group your records according to month, and you get groups of records according to month. So yes, sort of weird, but yes, good to know when you need it. Yeah, thank you. That's it.
Does anyone have any questions for Bruce? Wei-Liang, sorry.
Are we hiring? So the answer is difficult. We are sort of hiring. We're looking for semi-senior, senior developer positions. So yes, we are conducting a number of interviews lately, but I'm not sure exactly because I'm not directly involved in the process. So yes, but feel free to send an email to Gerald, if you know Gerald. Oh, I didn't know there's a slide there. Okay. Yeah. Gerald is not here today. He was planning to come, but he was going to have his wisdom tooth extracted. He had his wisdom tooth extracted today.